My name is Paul Parker. I was a first lieutenant in Vietnam. I was 7562, which is a CH-46 pilot.
And what was your rank?
Oh, first lieutenant.
And where do you live now?
And I'm living in Stafford, Virginia.
Okay. When did you enlist in the Corps?
I was commissioned in the Marine Corps in June of '67. I was graduate of the University of Texas Navy ROTC program, and I came in right after I graduated, went to Quantico, Virginia, spent 6 months there, then went to flight school, and then came out of flight school, went to New River, North Carolina, where I joined my first tactical squadron, was there for 6 weeks, went on a Carib cruise down with the Marines, and for 6 weeks there, came back for 6 weeks, and then went to Vietnam. So it was in August of '69 that I went into country.
What's your family think about you joining the Corps?
Well, my family was excited about it. My dad was a Marine. He was a pilot, flew in Korea, and so he was very proud. I'm the firstborn and kind of followed the mold. He never sold the Marine Corps, but he was always inspirational to me, and so I think he was very proud that his son had gone in the Marine Corps and was a pilot. At the time, I wasn't sure whether I was going to make it or not because I'd had a little bit of problem with my eyes during the flight check, but I think I got a blessing on that and got through it and got through flight school.
What was flight school like?
It was really, it was very interesting. It was always exciting. There was always something new going on. You would start in, they had a series of different squadrons, and each one had a special purpose. You'd start at the primary flight, and it was all new, and you started at the bottom, and you looked up to the guys that were further along the flight school program with you, kind of like being the upperclassmen when you're in high school or something. But pretty soon you progressed to that point, and the new guys were looking to you. But then you'd leave that squadron, go to another squadron, and again you were a new guy. So you were looking up to the experienced ones, and you kind of went through this, and it took me about a year to go through. And I got my wings in March of 1969, and got married 2 weeks later, and then went to New River, and 18 weeks later it was in Vietnam.
What was it like the first time you soloed in flight school?
Soloing in flight school was very proud, a little bit scary. The instructor was sitting back, and he would run you through it. You'd do your touch and go landings, and you'd already gone through a lot of the acrobatic flight and all the basic flight, and you demonstrated that you could do it. But you're doing these landings out at one of the outlying fields, and he said, "Okay, make this one a full stop." And you knew he was gonna get out. And he'd say, "Okay, I want you to go out, make 2 touch and go landings, and come back, and you better not forget me." And so, but it was, at that point there was nothing like it. And I mean, this was the first time you were really on your own, up there by yourself, and you realized that, hey, it's me. And but he had enough faith in you to do it, and so you trusted his judgment, really. Even if you didn't have faith in yourself, you trusted his judgment that he was not going to put you where you weren't qualified to go. So it was exciting. It was a blast.
What was it like? What was the feeling the first time you landed in Vietnam?
Stepping off the plane in Vietnam, I remember coming in. It was early in the morning. It was before sunlight, and I joined the squadron. I joined HMM-164, and was with them for about 3 months. And we were in the first squadron that was pulled out of Vietnam. And we were pulled out. We went aboard an LPH, and with that, we floated off the coast for a period of time. And then after, I guess in the November time frame, they ordered 6 of us to go back in country. They were all lieutenants who did not have much time in country, and so they said, "Well, we need you there." So we went in, and at that point, I was the first one of the 6 to get back to Marble Mountain, and so I got to the S1, who was the people that the administrative office, they made the assignments. I said I wanted to go in 263, and the guy says, well, why is that? And I said, well, I was in New River before, and Colonel Ledbetter had a squadron there, and he had a great reputation. And I said, I want to be with a squadron. And he kind of chuckled, and he said, I was in 263. He says, yeah, we'll get you down there. And so I got in 263 in December, and I joined a couple guys that had been in the basic school with me. And so it was a good crew. Knew several of the people, and felt right at home.
Tell me more about Colonel Ledbetter then.
Well, the Colonel was always somebody that just had a great bit of common sense. You know, I mean, you're sitting there as a lieutenant, he's a lieutenant colonel, and you've got this image of what lieutenant colonels are going to be. You've come out of the basic school and flight school, and you're around a lot of the ground officers, and there's a distinct difference. And you realize later on that in the flying game, essentially, you and whether you're a lieutenant or you're a lieutenant colonel, you're both flying the same airplane. And I don't know if that's what makes a difference, but there's a different attitude, a little bit, I think, a little bit more camaraderie. There's not as much of a say chain, not a chain, but a caste system. It's still there. A lot of respect for him. But Ledbetter in particular was somebody that just had a great reputation, and he knew when to pat people on the back and when to kick them in the butt. So it was a good style of leadership. He was definitely one of the COs that I had that I thought, okay, if you ever make CO, this is a guy you want to emulate.
You have any funny stories about him?
I don't have any in particular. I've heard him tell some stories on himself, but he probably tells them better than I would. I'd forget some of the details on it.
Did you have any other MOS slots that you were interested in when you got in?
Well, not really. I came in with the idea of wanting to fly, and so that was my goal. But the recruiting slogan at the time was "Fly your own jet." And so I think everybody probably, or most of the guys, wanted to fly a jet. And the big picture was, I think, an F-4 flying off a carrier. It was a Navy recruiter and stuff. But when you get down to flight school, they had more guys wanting to go jets than they had slots. And so they based it primarily on your pre-flight grade, your pre-solo grade, and your ground school grade. And basically, you'd go up on the week that they were making selections, and they would say, we've got 5 slots, so they'd take the top 5 guys. Where do you want to go? If they wanted to go jets, they got it. If everybody else that week that was graduating or getting ready to go would get helicopters. But you know, so it kind of created a thing that the better pilots were F-4, were the jet guys, but once you got in country, I think the feeling was that we've always talked about the Marine Air Ground team, and being a helicopter pilot, when you go into the zone, you're picking up these guys in medevacs, you're taking them into a combat zone, you're bringing them beans, bullets, and Band-Aids. You felt part of that, and I think the rapport that we developed with the infantry guys was quite a bit different than the guys that flew fixed wing. The fixed wing guys would report on station, and the close air support they provided was great, but you know, they would check in and say, I've got 10 minutes on station. Well, we're flying out there 6-8 hours a day, you know, doing a resupply mission, you know, going out, picking up more stuff, going back to the guys, delivering it in the field and stuff. So my feeling was that we probably did more for the Marine Air Ground mission than all the fixed wing, at least in that particular point in time. But I don't minimize the fixed wing. I later flew fixed wing, and I appreciate that part. But
well, let's talk about the brotherhood then.
In which
just in general, the brotherhood of Marines.
Well, I think the thing that always distinguished the Marines is the fact that, first of all, everybody starts as an infantryman, and whether you were an officer and enlisted, as an example, in the basic school, all the officers that had just been commissioned went through. They were trained as 0301s, which is a basic infantry officer, and from there, every one of us could have gone down to Camp Lejeune or Camp Pendleton and gotten a platoon. As it was, if you were going flight school, you'd go down to Pensacola. If you're going to tanks, you'd go to Fort Knox. If you're going to artillery, you'd go to Fort Sill. But everybody had been trained as an infantry. So when you got in the field and you were supporting these guys, you understood what they were doing, and you had a better rapport, you had a better feeling for it. And even the fixed wing guys, Army guys would tell you that if they had a choice of close air support, they wanted Marine Air. And you know, there's just something about it. They've got that understanding of what's going on the ground, the importance to the ground, to the weed wiggler, and so you know, it just works out. But there's still a lot of competition, I think, between the everybody wants to feel that theirs is the best. And as a helicopter pilot, 50 feet and you know, 120 knots is a lot different from you know, flying a jet at 10,000 feet or something. And so it works itself out. It was funny because down in Chulai, you ended up talking to guys down there. Chulai was a jet base, and somebody said something to me about flying helicopters. He says, "I don't know how you guys can do it day in, day out, going into a zone and having somebody jump up with a machine gun and try and hose you down with it." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, going up to Hanoi and having somebody trying to stick a telephone pole up your exhaust pipe doesn't sound like much fun to me." So I was happy doing what I was doing. He was happy what he was doing, and we both enjoyed it. So it worked out pretty well.
So you flew fixed wing afterwards?
Yeah, I came back from Vietnam and went to Quantico for a tour. And out of that, I had put in for jet transition. And we had a large number of helicopter pilots in the Marine Corps at that time because there was a great need shortly before that. But they had a shortage of A6 pilots. And I had gone out to the basic school as an instructor, and I came back from leave and had a message that the monitor, the guy that writes your orders, had called. And I was told to give him a call. He said, "Can you be down at Corpus Christi?" I said, "What for?" He said, "For jet transition to A6. I said, "For that I sure can." So I went down there. I had already been to combat, got down there and went through training with the TA-4. And so I flew that and then transitioned to A6s up at Cherry Point. After that, started in '75 and flew probably about 1,000 hours, a little over 1,000 hours, 1,200 hours in the A6.
What was it like being in Corpus Christi?
Corpus is kind of out in the sticks, but the flying was good. The weather was down there was good. The fact that I was a combat veteran stood out because mostly they had students, nuggets down there, and I already had my wings, but I was going through, and so I got some, I guess probably some consideration from some of the pilots. I had one flight in which we were doing air combat maneuvering, and I busted the 10,000 foot minimum altitude, and the guy said, you know, he said, "If you were a regular student," he said, "I'd have to give you down." He said, "But you were completely safe, and you knew where you were going and what you were doing, so, you know, just don't do it again." But so it made it out, but it was the fact that I had combat time stood out because a lot of the Navy instructors down there did not have time. They had been students, gotten their wings, and were plowed right back as instructors. So, you know, coming through, all the Marine instructors all had combat time, and being a student that had combat time was a little unusual for them.
It's kind of odd, isn't it, when you think about it, the instructors had not ever done anything besides flown and then instructed? Yeah,
having instructors that had not been out to the fleet may or may not have been a great idea. I think it was just, I don't know what the timing was, why they had so many extra, if you will, pilots that they needed instructors while they plowed these guys right back. It would seem to make a lot more sense to give guys that had already done their tactical tour, but there apparently was quite a wait to get into the tactical squadrons. They had these guys stashed at a number of different places around on bases doing all sorts of things.
What was your favorite song or favorite songs during the war?
Probably American Pie. Really liked that. Kansas City. I can't remember if I Got to Get Out of This Place was at that time frame or not. It became a great one. I'm Leaving Home, or I'm Leaving on a Jet Plane was another one. I don't think that was it may not have been out at that time, but those were particularly Kansas City. That seemed to be one that everybody joined in at the club. When that one came on, everybody sang. So.
Any particular band that was a favorite?
I'm not real big on knowing the bands and stuff like that. I like the Eagles, and I like Creedence Clearwater. They were good. They were two of the ones I think I enjoyed.
How about the women?
I think I saw the Bob Hope show both at Da Nang and at down at Chulai, and Connie Stevens was in that, and I've got a couple pictures of her that I think to me are special. She was just a beautiful lady, and it was really special being there with the Bob Hope show.
How long were you on active duty?
I stayed 20 years. Okay. I was in the Marine Corps for 20 years. I came in '67, got out in June of '87, just a little over, I guess, 20 years in a few days, and got out as a major.
What were your favorite bars around the base or in the country?
I don't think I got into, when I was in Vietnam, I don't think I got off base that often that I went into to the bars in there. I did, went to the club, and that was basically the biggest, the only spot really for recreation as long as you were in Vietnam. When I was with 164, I was aboard ship for a while. We pulled into a couple ports, and we went into Subic Bay, Cuby Point. That was big. Into Okinawa, some of the places down there. But in country, the only place we really went was to Officers Club.
Well, out of country, any favorite bars?
I don't remember them by name.
Besides Duff.
I don't remember any of the bars by name. Ended up going to. I just remember the first time I went into Cuby Point, or Cuby. One of the guys in the squadron was going to take us on a FAM. They called it FAM 1. It was going to take us into Olongapo, and at that point, Olongapo had dirt streets, had policemen with machine guns, and they had a curfew on there. It was like Officer and a Gentleman. It was actually talked about the same kind of thing. It wasn't the same time frame, but it was Officer and a Gentleman. It was much more tamed down from that. But you could go into bars, and the bands did excellent imitations of American artists. You close your eyes, you'd hear Johnny Cash or whoever. I mean, you'd swear he was right there in person singing, because they had all the nuance, all the extras in there, and it just was really amazing to hear them do their imitations, because I couldn't tell the difference.
You know what else came out of there recently is Journey. Journey got a new singer that sounds just like the old one out of the Philippines.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, they
Exactly
they did an excellent job. They were a good entertainment troops, and we really enjoyed when they would have a show.
What are some of your best R&R memories?
Well, I went when I was I joined 263, and a lot of the people were talking about R&R, and you were only supposed to get one R&R, but frequently it would happen that somebody would get signed up for R&R and couldn't go. So everybody's saying, well, you can get two. Just go ahead and sign up for one, and then you get on standby, or sign up as standby for it, and when somebody drops off, you get to go, and then you get your regular one later on. So I went to Bangkok, and it was really fascinating. Great spot, and took a lot of pictures. Went through one of the temples there, and there was a young man that was looking to be he wanted to be our guide, and he probably knew more American history than I did, because he just tied everything that he talked about there to what was happening in the United States and Europe. And it was amazing that he had that much grasp of it. But he was an excellent guide. Some of the sites were beautiful, and just really amazing. There's one big Buddha that's laying on its side. It's all gold, and I think he's like 34 feet long or something like that. It was amazing. But went to a lot of the cultural exhibits and things like that. Got a lot of good pictures out of that. I really enjoyed that.
Have you ever been back to look at it again?
No, I haven't. I've thought about it, but never gotten around to going back there. And I would enjoy doing it. I thought it was a fascinating spot, and it would be very enjoyable to go back.
Well, you got any stories you want to share, both bad or good?
Well, let's see, bad or good. I think on the bad side, probably one of the worst days was on a recon mission, and we had picked up 3 recon teams and from Da Nang area, and we were going south to An Hua. An Hua was a combat base, and I don't remember who was the units that were down there, but we were going to use that as a staging point, and we dropped off 2 of the recon teams. We had 1 recon team with us, and when we pulled into the PAX pad, we had pulled up behind another 46 who was shut down, which meant that their blades were not turning, their engines were off and everything. But as we got ready to leave, they started turning. And when their blades started turning, it was obvious that their aft blades were overlapped with our forward blades. And this was not good. But if everything had just stayed cool, it would have worked, because the aft blades were about 16 feet and the forward blades were about 11 feet. So there was a clearance in there, but in trying to taxi forward and turn out, the pilot pulled back the stick and the aft blades hit the forward ones. They're going in different directions, and then it was like a washing machine with a load of towels on one side, just started shaking itself apart, and it rolled over on its side. And I could remember my bullet bouncer was just going up and down. I'm trying to hold it down. I said, God, make it stop, you know, and it finally did stop. And so I unstrapped and I reached down. I checked with the pilot, Tommy, okay? And it was Tom Cook, I think, was the pilot on that. And he said, yeah, I'm good. Go ahead, get out. So I turned around and I stepped on his helmet trying to get out, and I pushed out the door, the side door on the 46, and tried to get out. And the armored seat had a part that came over here. I was a co-pilot at that time, so I was sitting on the left-hand side, and you had to disconnect that and open that. So I had to come back down, open that, and then as I stick my head out, everybody's saying, get them out, it's going to burn, and that really motivates you to get out. And so I kind of just did a somersault into the crowd, and they caught me, and my visor had broken and had cut my cheek, and so my face was pretty bloody at the time. So they took me over to the crash crew had responded to it, and I guess they had an ambulance on there. They took me over to Battalion Aid Station and stitched me up over there, and then they flew me, and I guess the only 2 people that were hurt on there was myself, and one of the recon guys twisted his wrist. And now there's probably 6 or 7 recon guys in the back, plus a crew of 5, and the only 2 guys that got hurt were the 2 of us. And in that PAX pad where we had taxied in, there was also a refueling pit. And hot refueling, what you did, you would pull up, and with the engines running, you would hook up your the fuel lines, and they could refuel the airplanes without shutting the airplanes down. And the blades separated, broke up, hit some of the Cobras. There were 2 Cobras that were hot refueling, and they took shrapnel damage from that. But the PAX pad, this was right at lunch, and the PAX pad had people and vehicles walking around it on the outside of it, and nobody got hurt, nobody got hit with any of the shrapnel, and so that was really amazing. But they flew us, then they took us up to Da Nang. We went to the hospital up there. I think it was Charlie Med, or NSA, Naval Support Activity Hospital, and got checked over and got released.
What was it like flying the Chinook?
Flying the CH-46, the Sea Knight, I thought it was really exciting. When I was going through flight school, they had a Marine flight that was all Marine instructor pilots, and all but one of them were former H-34 pilots. And the one instructor that was a 46 pilot was mine, Bob Burns. And he used to take a lot of heat from them because there was a problem with the aft section of the CH-46 separating. In fact, the joke was, do you know what a CH-46 is? No, what? That's two CH-23s flying in formation. And it really wasn't funny, a little bit of black humor, but by that point, by the time I got into it, it had been corrected. And it was a great plane. I loved the mission. In fact, when I checked into New River right out of flight school, I asked to go in the 46. A lot of guys were trying to get Cobras or 53s or OV-10s, and I just liked the mission. And I thought it was exciting. We were part of the action. You were going into zones for recon extracts, inserts. You were taking troops into assaults. You were doing medevacs. You were doing resupply. You were doing command and control. You were doing everything. And it handled well. And it was just a great aircraft, and I enjoyed the crew concept with it, having the crew chief, the gunners, and all working with you. It was a good bird. I really enjoyed it.
What was its strongest point?
I think probably the strongest point was really the flexibility. It was good size, so it operated well from a ship, which I did with the SLF. It could go into zones that even the 53s couldn't go in because of its size. It had enough power. When I first got there, I was flying CH-46 Alphas, which had a smaller engine, and we really had some problems. It was designed to carry 18 troops, and with the Alphas and the hot temperatures that we had in Vietnam, you frequently had to cut down the size of the troop load, the number of troops that you carried. But with the Deltas and the Echoes, they got more power, and we really didn't have too much problem with troops. Now, if we were carrying cargo with the hot temperatures, it could be a problem, and you had to pay attention, particularly if you're going into a higher zone. Helicopters are always susceptible to the high altitudes, high temperatures, or high gross weights. And the combination of those three, you had to work all three of them out to safely get it into and out of a zone.
How about the weak? Yeah.
I don't know what the real weakest point of the 46 is. It probably was just the fact that you can never have enough power, you know. That's something that you always want to have is power, and there were times when we were going into a zone and we would have to dump fuel to be able to get down to a gross weight that we could land and either pull people out or whatever. And of course, when you dump fuel, then that cuts down the amount of time that your endurance. And so I would say that's a shortcoming, but it's just a general design characteristic. You know, you work within the envelope that you're given, and you plan to refuel when you need to, and you work around it. So I think some of the helicopters today, like 53, can aerial refuel. We couldn't do that at that time, and I don't know that we would need to do that, but having more power is always good.
I must have more power.
You're right.
Any more stories and stuff?
I think one of the missions I remember was a night medevac. Those were generally colorful because you got called out at night, you knew it was going to be serious. And this was down in the 7th Marine area, and I can remember going in. We had set up, we had got out to the area okay, we'd called for the zone brief, and they were going to provide flares for the
Could we take that from
sure.
the top?
Okay. Another mission that I guess
One more time. Then this will be close to it for now. You know,
Okay.
air conditioner room
Okay.
and all that.
Okay. One of the missions that kind of stands out was a night medevac down with the 7th Marines, and we had gone down to the area. We'd been called out. We got down there okay, and the C-130s were providing flares that night, and flares always made it good because trying to land at night, you wanted to keep your lights off because obviously that provided illuminated target, and so working with flares was good. But the problem with that was the fact if you were on short final and the flares went out, you just went from daylight to midnight, and you didn't have transition, and that happened to us one night, and that was kind of scary coming into that, getting the lights on in time, and being able to get in, get out with that was good. So it kind of takes your breath away when it's happening, but you get back from it, and you think, okay, well, that comes with the territory.
Some more stories?
I think one of the funniest ones was actually the Bob Hope show down at Chulai. I had gone down there, I was flying search and rescue, and I was due to come back. We'd go down there for a week, fly day on, day off, and then at the end of the 7 days they would send down another crew and another aircraft. And so I'm waiting with the whole crew that had been down there that week. We're waiting for a replacement, and this major comes up, and he had been an instructor pilot of mine when I was going through flight school, and he says, "Lieutenant," he says, "can I get a ride back to Da Nang with you?" And I said, "Sure, no problem, we'll be glad to take you." Well, the replacement aircraft was late coming down, and they were supposed to be there like noon or something like that, and it's getting to be about 1:30. Well, the Bob Hope show was starting at 2 o'clock, and it was going to be over at the Americal division over at the amphitheater. So we decided, well, heck, we're going to go to the Bob Hope show. "Hey, Major, you want to go to the Bob Hope show?" He said, "Yeah, sure." So we got in the search and rescue bird, and we took off, and we flew over to the Americal division, which was really just the other side of the field, but it was the only transportation we had. So we flew over there, and the show was going to be in an amphitheater, and right above the amphitheater on a big hill was a medevac pad. And so our plan was to go land at the medevac pad, and so we called, tried to get clearance in the pad, and nobody answered. Well, we called, the pad was clear, nobody answered, so we went ahead and spiraled down and landed at the medevac pad. We came off, and pilot took off and went back to the search and rescue pad, or spot, and 3 MP Jeeps come roaring up, and "Who's the senior man here?" "The lieutenant, or the major is." You know, and this poor guy was just along for the ride, but you know, we were smart enough to know majors are senior to lieutenants, so we put the onus on him, and he got introduced to the commanding general at the Americal division, and who had a one-way conversation with the major, I think, and he was not pleased. We had shut down the Bob Hope show with our helicopter landing just above him on the Americal pad. So that was the first time that I saw the Bob Hope show that year. Then later on they went up to Da Nang, and I got a chance to see it again, and that's where I got my photographs of it. So that was kind of humorous to me, and enjoyed that one.
Got another one?
Well, the first night I came in country, got into the I hadn't joined the squadron yet. They were waiting to decide where I was going to go, and I went to eventually went to 164, and so I was in the Sea Hooch, Southeast Asian Hooch, and we were racked out and everything, and these sirens go off. Well, this is the first night in country. Nobody had said anything about it. We didn't know what the heck it was. And there was one guy who had, I don't know if he was leaving or if he lived there permanently. He says, air raid, everybody get in the bunker." And hell, we didn't even know where the bunker was, you know. But we got down there, everybody's in their skivvies, you know, in the sand, in the bunker, in this thing. And we wait, and finally it's all clear. And so we get out of there, and we get all dusted off and kind of get back in the rack, and everything's kind of sandy and everything. And it was not too long before the siren went off again, and all 3 of the new guys beat the old guy the second time. We knew what it was that time. We didn't waste any time, and we beat him into the bunker. So that was kind of my welcome to Vietnam. So that kind of stood out with me for a while.
What was it like the last time you flew in country?
The last flight in country, I was flying with Steve Crahy, and he and I were both getting short, and we had actually stopped flying, and we were due to go home in like a week or something like that, and they said, "Hey, we got this admin flight. We need to take some Seabees down off the coast of Chulai to a volcanic island down there." They were inspecting some site or something like that, so we said, okay, that's cool. We'll go down and do that, and we get some flight time. And we came back, and they wanted us to get a certain amount of flight time. I can't, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it was. And we still had some time left, and so we decided we'd do auto rotations. The auto rotation, you basically bottom the power, and it's if you had an engine failure, that's what you would be doing, is an auto rotation. And the idea, as I recall, is you'd come to about 75 feet. You're coming down pretty fast. 75 feet, you begin pulling your nose up, pulling in power again, and the momentum of the blades begins to give you a little bit more lift, and you change the downward movement and the forward movement, try to arrive at the ground with zero airspeed and on the ground. And we just misjudged, and it scared both of us so badly. We both looked at each other and kind of looked at each other, same said, time to land. And so we shut that one down, taxied in, and they said, you didn't get any time. We got all the time we're going to get. And we were not interested in pranging in a bird with 1 week to go, having successfully completed a tour. That was it. We were done. And so that was the end. And then I ended up transitioning to A6s after that, so I never flew a 46 again.
What was it like when you got out of Vietnam and came home?
That was probably,
Feelings?
leaving Vietnam was probably one of the greatest feelings of freedom. And the area that you came into and you got out of Da Nang, where you came into the passenger pad over there, was called Freedom Hill. And it was basically the 747s that brought you in were Freedom Birds. And actually the birds that took you out were Freedom Birds. I don't know what they called the ones that brought you in, but they were referred to as the Freedom Birds. And you go over to Freedom Hill, and in preparation for that, you know, there's a long drawn-out process, and people are, you know, tired. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and people are just tired, but they're glad to be getting out of there. And you finally get on the bird and sit down. You hear the engines crank up, and when that aircraft lifted off, there was the biggest cheer you'd ever heard. I mean, people were, all right, headed home, you know, and that was a great feeling.
What was it like when you got home, actually home?
It was kind of amazing. When I got home, at the other end of that flight, I came into Norton, and it was really a great feeling being at Norton, because they did everything they could. Actually, I think we came into Norton, and I had a flight out of Los Angeles Airport out of that, but they did everything they could to expedite us getting out of the military plane and getting over to Los Angeles. They were going to have transportation for us, and all we had to do was wait. And we said, baloney. You know, we got a taxi. How many people would a guy take in a taxi? We paid the money to go out there to the airport. But I mean, they even had Air Force Lieutenant Colonels moving our bags off the Freedom Bird to get them to us and get us out of there, because they knew we had one thing on our mind, that was get home. And so I came home, and my wife was in New Jersey. Picked her up and then came back to San Francisco, because I had some school that I was going to after that. And so picked her up. We spent about 30 days around San Francisco area, which was nice. It was a great time.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I can't think of anything. I don't think of anything else.
Anybody else got anything?
Cool.
You have three.
Arigato gozaimasu.
Freedom Birds.
I think the other part of coming home was obviously the anti-war protests that were going on. I'd graduated from the University of Texas, where they had a very active Students for Democratic Society and all, and there was obviously a lot of political discussion about that, but I had always felt like, without judging whether we should be there or not, we had Americans there, and the mission of the 46 took care of those guys, the Americans that we had there. And so I was always proud of what we had done. But after the war, I pretty much just left that. I didn't read any books about it. I didn't go to the movies about it. I just kind of left it. But several years after the Vietnam Memorial had been erected, I had a cousin from Ohio. He lives up in the farm country of Ohio, and he and a buddy had flown down, and each of them had brought their sons. And they were coming down for to do something in Washington D.C. and they wanted to stop by the Vietnam Memorial, and I said, well, I'd never been there, but yeah, I'd take them and we'd go to it. And it was quite an emotional experience to go there and realize that I knew several people. I'd lost one of the guys in my hooch. I'd come back from R&R and he had been killed while I was on R&R. And one of the last 46s that crashed on the withdrawal from Saigon was Bill Neistel, and Bill flew with us when we were in I think 263, and so it was an emotional experience going down there. And there was a card at the bottom of one of the panels, and it was from a Vietnamese that said, "I never realized what it meant or what it cost you to come to my country to fight for my freedom until I came to your country." And it kind of sums it up, you know. And all the political discussion, I think, goes by the wayside on that. So.